And, I have a home group and a sponsor, and thank you, David, for asking me to come out here. It's always an honor and privilege to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Even if it means sitting in the car for 3 hours in Montgomery County traffic with an unbearable newcomer that I start sponsoring who just knows everything. Still worth it, you know. And I'm not kidding when I say Alcoholics Anonymous gave me everything. You know, I was drunk. Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, alcohol almost killed me. I have nothing bad to really say about drinking other than, you know, when push came to shove, I couldn't stop. You know, and thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. It gave me a chance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give you guys in a general way my experience with alcoholism, my experience of coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, and the recovery process that I found here. I was raised in a Jehovah's Witness household. I don't know if you guys know who they are or not, but they're the ones that come around and knock on your door on a Saturday morning and try to sell you Bibles and all that. And I did that from as far back as I can remember. Put my little clip-on tie on, go out there, talk about God. And you know, my parents, they're good people. They taught me just about every spiritual principle necessary. You know, to be a good, wholesome, well-rounded kid. I mean, we were very, very strict Christians. We prayed before every meal. Went to the Kingdom Hall, which is our church, like 5 times a week. And I remember I gave my first talk, you know, out of one of the books of the Bible when I was 8 years old in front of 150 people. You know, and it's just how I was raised. And when I was 13. You know, without any true understanding of God, I went through the process of being baptized because that's what you do. You know, my grandfather was one of the CEOs over at Patterson, New York, which is kind of the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, and me and my brother were always known as the Ripley Boys. So it was just kind of like, you know, it was just kind of what you do, you know. And I remember, you know, I went through all the meetings, and I got baptized in front of about 50,000 people at a convention center in New York City, and so all in all, you think. You know, I was doing everything that I was supposed to do, and I can tell you right about this time, probably about the age of 14, 15, I started to notice that there was just something a little off. You know, I wouldn't say that I was different, but I would say I was a shy kid. You know, I was probably full of fear. I was a little scared to talk to my peers. I'd go to school and I didn't really know what to say to anybody, and I was just kind of like that kid that just stuck to himself, didn't really get into any too much trouble. Did all of the schoolwork. You know, just kind of the no-name kid in the back of the class that stuck to himself, you know. And my parents at this point split up. My mom, she's kind of a little emotionally unstable, you know. She had raised us, you know, with that whole discipline, do not spare the rod thing. And when we did something wrong that God didn't like, we got the shit kicked out of us, you know. And that's just how I was raised. When my parents split up, you know, I wanted to go live with my dad because my dad was just a lot nicer than my mom. I really can't say it any other way, you know. And my dad, though, unfortunately, didn't really, you know, have too much going for him. He lived in a red van, so I lived with him for a little bit in this red van. We just kind of traveled up and down the East Coast, staying in hotels and with friends that would let us stay with them. And I didn't really do too much schooling at this point. Probably did this for about 9 months to a year, and then we ended up in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And the reason why I share that is because at this point now, like I really feel secluded. I really feel a little off. You know, I'm starting high school for the first time in a couple of years. I definitely don't know how to make friends. Haven't really had any experience with really just been me and my dad for the last year. And I start school and I get my first job as a bag boy at Antonin's Market. It's a grocery store right across from the apartment where we live. And again, just that quiet kid, keep to myself, don't really cause any trouble, don't really talk to anybody. And some of my coworkers asked me if I wanted to stay after and get drunk with them. I mean, they asked me, like, hey, you drink. And now, you know, I'm a good Jehovah's Witness. You know, I was taught drink is bad, drugs bad. I went through the DARE program, just say no. And for whatever reason, maybe it was the attention, maybe it was that somebody was being nice to me, I said yes. You know, and no idea what I was getting into, but I said yes, and I stayed with them. We went around back. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I remember sitting there in this, you know, circle of all my peers, and I just remember feeling so nervous and awkward and afraid, and they're all talking amongst themselves, and they're all like, you know, laughing and having a good time, and again, it's just me and them, and I don't know what to say. I feel awkward. I don't want to say anything stupid. You know, I want to impress these guys, and just my head's going, you know, in that fear. And I always walked around with them. It was just real. and they pulled out this big bottle of Aristocrat vodka. I remember it to this day. And they started passing it around. They started pulling shots off of it, and I mean, I never drank before, but I didn't want to, I wanted to impress my friends, so I took a nice big pull off of it, and it burned real good. And then it went around again, and I took another big pull. And I don't know when it happened. Probably about the third or fourth pull. I remember just sitting there. I'm talking to the guy to my left like it's no big deal. I'm talking to the guy to my right like it's no big deal. And we're just hanging out. It's all of us. And I'm just one of many. For the first time in my life, I have this ability to hang out and talk, and I feel comfortable, and I have this confidence that I never had before, and I'm funny, and I got all these cool things to say, and alcohol did for me in that moment something that nothing else ever had. It gave me the ability to feel comfortable and confident in my own skin. It gave me the ability it gave me courage that I'd never experienced before, and I loved it. I absolutely loved that feeling that alcohol gave me. And I got nice and drunk that night, and I woke up the next morning, and I knew that I had found the answer. That's what I had been missing this whole time. That's what I had been looking for. They were trying to keep it away from me for whatever reason growing up, but that was it. That was the magic. And I fell in love with it. And I was not a weekend warrior. I started drinking pretty much daily right out the back. Why wouldn't you? If you felt like I did when I was sober, and drinking did that for you, why wouldn't you drink every day? And so I did. So I started going to school just to get drunk, just to get high. I met some new acquaintances. Were entrepreneurs. They had their own distribution business, and they were pretty popular. They were pretty good at it, and I was kind of like a big doofy kid that that's been getting picked on and beat up his whole life. And now that I have all this courage and confidence, I'm the one that's going to do the picking on. You know what I mean? And of course I wasn't a bully, but I stood up for myself, and I got a reputation pretty quickly, and they liked that. They liked having somebody like that around. So my new friends kept me around. And it was awesome. I got to party, I got to, get high, I got to do everything that I wanted to do, and I got to live the dream. I lived the dream for about 2 years. I couldn't do any wrong. Dropped out of high school, obviously, because you don't need that anymore, There's no reason to go to school. My guys were making plenty of money. I had plenty of money. I had plenty of respect. Everybody knew my name. Everybody knew my friend's name. I could go anywhere. I could do anything. And I did, and I partied hard. And I couldn't tell you at the time that, that I was chasing that feeling, that every time I woke up feeling that fear and that uncomfort that I needed to get another drink just to feel normal, I just knew I liked to party. That's exactly what it looked like. I just liked to party. And I did. And I started to have a lot of blackouts. I was a big Mad Dog drinker. I love Mad Dog. Aristocrat, still loved Aristocrat vodka. And pretty much just about anything else, And, I started blacking out pretty regularly, not too many consequences. I came to in a few hospitals a couple times. I came to in a couple holding cells, again, no real trouble, just being caught in public doing stupid stuff and blackouts. And then eventually I started coming to, with or without my clothes, not really sure what was going on, but at some point in the night I guess I'd get hot or something and get naked. Again, for about 2 years, the blackouts started, a little more frequently. And by about the age of 18, I just turned 18, and came out of the blackout butt naked in a stolen car driving down Route 181. And that was a problem. So, I got arrested. I got caught. I actually got caught because I pulled up to my house because I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew how to get home from where I was at. So I pulled up to my house in this brand new Audi, and we were pretty poor. My dad knew I didn't go out and buy an Audi. It also didn't help that I was butt naked when I walked in the door. He called the police on me, and they came and they arrested me. And I made, Fox 5 News, the front page of most of the newspapers up there, all up and down the East Coast, actually. So I know some friends of mine, grandparents from Pennsylvania, were sending newspaper clippings like, "Do you know this guy?" So my reputation kind of changed, and my friends were taking note of my blackouts and my uncontrolled, outbursts, and without me even realizing it, and this was kind of like the catalyst that caused them to say, "Dude, we can't have you around. I mean, this is kind of crazy." I was pulling the type of attention that they didn't want, And what happened is I kind of became what Bill talks about, an unwelcome hanger-on, you know. Everywhere I went, any party I went to, anybody I tried hanging out with, they just didn't really want me around, you know. And so I had to do what everybody else would do. I mean, run, you know. That's all I really knew how to do. I was in trouble. I was on probation. I wasn't allowed to leave the state, but I did, you know, because I didn't really want to deal with it. And I didn't really feel welcomed anywhere. My uncle owned a horse farm down in Harrisonburg, Virginia. It's probably not too far from here. And, you know, he told me if I come down and stay with him that you know, he'd show me the ways of a farm, you know, teach me how to be a man, all that good stuff. And the thing about my uncle, though, is that he was an ex-gangbanger from Ridgefield, Connecticut. He was one of the first leaders of the first biker gangs up in Ridgefield. And this was just kind of like his retirement spot. So my uncle hadn't really changed much, except he wasn't, you know, doing anything too illegal, just mildly illegal. And I, you know, kind of like that. So what he introduced me to was subscription pain medicine. What he was kind of hooked on, and what we would do is we'd take a 2x4 and we'd beat up my side all nice and good, and we'd go from hospital to hospital to hospital, all up and down this area, you know, faking injuries and getting pain pills prescribed. Now, mind you, I wasn't really the brightest bulb in the box, and I used all my real information, so I had trash bags, medical bills to make amends later when I came in the room, but that's a different story. But you know, for probably close to 6 to 9 months, I did that, and I found a whole new level of drinking, you know, and a whole new level of. And if you ever mix alcohol or anything else, you know, like, you know, it just takes you down pretty quickly, and I became a junkie pretty quick, you know, and then what happened was, you know, I started losing control again of everything, and I started blacking out more and more regularly, and you know, I started, you know, wetting myself pretty regularly in my uncle's, you know, in the guest bedroom. My aunt wasn't really having it, and, you know, I was starting to come to, you know, naked in the living room and stuff like that, and she had like an 8-year-old daughter, and it just wasn't really cool, you know. So again, I wore out my welcome, you know, and I had to move on. And so I did, and what happened next was I spent the next 2 years kind of traveling up and down the East Coast, spent a little time out in West Virginia. Had an uncle out there that lived in a trailer behind a church in Matthias, literally in the middle of nowhere. They had a post office and a gas station, that's it. And I would spend some time with him, just being able to drink. And anywhere I went, it was strictly just so that I could drink and get high. And again, I just went from one place to another until I would wear out my welcome. And I can tell you that somewhere along the way, my drinking had definitely changed. I mean, it wasn't about partying anymore. It wasn't about necessarily, you know, feeling like a man or getting the girl or anything like that. It was more about just being able to feel comfortable, you know, because over the course of the last 3 years, I collected quite a few memories and incidents and things that when I was dead sober, when I would wake up in the morning, you know, these things would plague me. And it was all these regrets, you know, and all these fears and all these nameless faces of people that I had screwed over or hurt and or that I was afraid to see. And it was just these tapes of the story itself that would just constantly go over and over. And so when I drank, that went away. You know, when I drank, I felt comfortable, you know, again. And so, you know, again, just staying drunk. And when at one time I went back down, I was staying with that uncle in West Virginia, and what I would do is I would drive about 40 minutes to JMU, because I'm about 19, almost 20 at this time, and, you know, they like to party at JMU. And then I'm about the same age as all the college kids, so I figured out quickly that I could just go there and on a Thursday night, and I could just find all the carriers, and I could just party with them. And I could literally just drink till 4 or 5 in the morning, and then go home, you know, and all for free. It's pretty awesome. And they never asked any questions until I accidentally knocked over one of the football players' girlfriends, and the whole team tried fighting me. Or I actually tried fighting them, if I'm honest. Fortunately, you know, they took pity on me because all they saw was this drunk knucklehead that clearly they would have destroyed, and I'm always grateful that they didn't. But so I started again, becoming unwelcome there. And but, you know, before I fully worn out my welcome, at some point I was driving back one night in a blackout, because that was pretty regular occurrence. I drove in blackouts all the time. I would always be partying and then just kind of come to the next morning at my trailer or sitting in my car at some gas station or something. No recollection of the night before. And then this one night, you know, I was driving home, and I wasn't quite in a blackout. Like, I have very shady memories, but I remember kind of a rumbling, and then an explosion of glass. Like, I remember the explosion of glass, and I don't really remember anything else. But I came to in my bed in the trailer, and I came to my uncle knocking on the door, wondering where my car was, because I guess he needed a ride in town or something. And I said, I didn't feel comfortable driving. I left it on the side of the road. Can we go get it? Can we borrow my mom's car and go get it? We are quick enough, so you don't really know what's going on, but we're going to make something up real quick. And I did, and we got in their car, and just hoping that I hope I find it somewhere. I kind of know the path that I would have been driving on, and so we're driving along, and we come up, we're driving, and we come up on a couple fire trucks, a few ambulances, some stadies, on the side of the road, and I just got that very familiar feeling in the pit of my stomach. That feeling of that has something to do with me. I probably did that, and I was right. It was my car. I had driven. Fortunately, I didn't hit anybody else. I had just driven through a field. I had hit a giant oak tree. It just completely disintegrated my car. I was just sitting wrapped around the other side of the oak tree in the ditch, completely mangled. And to this day, I can't tell you how I got home. I don't really know. I just know that I came to. I mean, I'm assuming maybe I got thrown from the vehicle and just kind of walked, or maybe I don't know. Like, I really have no idea, or maybe just the grace of God really loves dumb drunks. I don't know. But, at this point, I did have a job with an electrical company. I was an electrical apprentice with this good old boy, Billy, Benfield Electric. And what had happened is I would go and I would meet him in the morning in Newmarket, and we would drive out to Leesburg and we would work. But now I couldn't go and meet him. So what he offered to do was he offered to rent me a room in his house. Now, obviously I took him up on it because I didn't have any other choice. I didn't want to lose my job, and it was my only source of income. So this guy, like I said, he was a good old boy. We called him Big Daddy. He was a good, big beer belly redneck. And he lived in this house with a family of 5. Now this house was a little rundown. Probably hadn't been clean the whole 16 years they had lived there. When I say that, it's because when you walk in the front door, the trash, I'm not exaggerating when I say that, piled up to about this table height, maybe a little less, over every square foot of floor. And there were paths cut in the trash to get to chairs, to get to the TV, to get to the stairs. And every 3 feet, there was those yellow strips collecting the flies. And they were all black. And we didn't really take them down, we just hung new ones. And so those were everywhere. And it didn't matter how many you hung. That kitchen, it was like a swarm of flies. I mean, you just any room in the house you went to, you know how you hear that, the old furnace humming in the background? Well, you just heard the buzzing of the flies everywhere you went. And it was mostly because of the smell and the stagnant water that was in the kitchen because we didn't have any drainage. So every bathtub and sink had a pool of just real nasty water. And again, the smell so bad you have to hold your breath when you walk into the kitchen. And I tried making a peanut butter and jelly within the first day or two, and I got 5 flies in it. I was this ain't happening. And of course, a house like that, you're going to have rats. And there were rats. In every room you walk into, you see 3 or 4 rats scattered. And I rented the room at the top of the stairs to the left for $50 a week. Pretty good deal, if you ask me. No other bills, nothing. Obviously, I didn't have a cell phone at this time. Even if I think maybe cell phones were out, but there's no way I would have been able to qualify or get one. So I just had to pay the $50, and that was good. And I had the room, completely empty. It was a little dirty. There was no trash in it though. So it was wood floors, disgusting wood floors. So they were wood floors. And there was a little twin mattress that sat in the corner. It's just a mattress, and it had Star Wars sheets on it. And I guarantee you, those sheets have been on there since that movie came out. That thing hadn't moved in a long time. But I got to sleep on that, and I remember, like I said, this guy, he also lived there with a family of 5. The wife, who was bigger than him, was on house arrest for beating up somebody at the local Walmart. He had the boy, who was, this 14-year-old kid who was a hunter to be. He'd just be posted out in the backyard at all times, just killing us about anything. He'd shoot rats, dogs, cats, birds, deer, whatever. Anything that came in the backyard got killed. And he'd like cut their heads off, half gut them, skin them, just practicing for the big game. It's all right. That was cool. And he had a daughter, a 15-year-old daughter, who, not going to lie, she's a good-looking girl, and she liked to party. But, obviously Big Daddy had a lot of guns, and I wasn't going to go anywhere near her. So she went next door, got impregnated by the 31-year-old who lived over there, and then he ended up moving in. And then there was me, Junior. They called me Junior. And I fit right in with them. I'm not going to lie. We just lived there like a real dysfunctional Brady Bunch. And I can tell you the first night, I'm lying there on this cot and I'm listening to the walls, the rats crawl around the walls, and I'm listening to the fighting downstairs. And I remember being filled with the strongest feeling of impending doom that I think I'd ever felt at that moment. And just the level of fear and the level of torture that I was experiencing at that moment. Like, how? Why? Like, what happened? Like, how did I end up here? And I can tell you this is when my drinking took a major change. Because it was, again, no longer just about feeling good. But it was just about being okay with whom would I become. I had to stay drunk in order to live in those conditions. In order to be that person, to be able to be okay with this, I had to be drunk. And I did. And I stayed drunk, and I lived like that for about 9 months. Until another drunken public landed me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was very familiar with getting drunk in public, but this time they had, I guess, had enough of it, and down in Rockland County, they had sent me to the ASFAB or ASAP program, something like that, and I was required to go to 10 AA. Now, I didn't know anything about AA. I really wasn't quite sure what it was. I knew it had something to do with not drinking. I knew AA had something to do with not doing drugs, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out what AAA was. But I knew they all had something to do with it. And that's what we were dealing with when I got there. And I remember going, nobody in that house was going to give me a ride, so I had to go to Walmart on the way home from work one day. And I had to buy a $50 Roadmaster bike so that I could ride from this house about 15 miles into town, in the Harrisonburg, and go to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember riding my bike there and just being miserable, and it just sucks. Got to go to 10 meetings, that's all I got to do. But obviously I'm on probation for one arrest, I'm still on probation for the arrest in Connecticut, and I just could not afford any more legal trouble if I was going to go to jail for a long time. So I was going to go to A&A, And I remember I showed up there and I went into my first meeting, and it was still just very nice, clean-cut people. They all looked like they were living the American dream. They all looked like they were happy and comfortable, and they're smiling. And I remember, they just had this thing in their eye. Like they could look at you. They could look at you in the eye, and they could talk to you, and they were genuine. And I knew these people weren't like me. I knew they had no idea. I know what's going on here. The judge is putting me in a room filled with all these good, wholesome Americans, and I'm supposed to feel so bad about who and what I am, and I'm going to want to be just like you. It's going to be just another version of drug class. Because I knew drug class. I was very familiar with drug class. Drug class, to me, was a great place to network. You meet all the local dealers, you meet all the local potential buyers. It's awesome. This was clearly different, and that's really the only thing I could put my finger on, and so I remember sitting there. My first thought was, F you people, you have no idea what it's like to be me. You have no idea what I've been through. You don't know what's going on, And I just sat there, and I was not happy to be there. And the gentleman at the front of the room, he said his piece, and then he asked if there was anybody new to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I raised my hand, and he called on me. He tricked me, asked me to share. I didn't really know what to say. I knew I liked drinking. I knew you weren't going to get me to stop drinking. So I kind of talked about that a little bit. I talked about how much I enjoyed alcohol, how much better I felt when I was drinking than when I was sober. How, some of the things that I had gone through, I just couldn't really imagine, being okay with myself. And what I didn't realize is that I was sharing on the topic of alcoholism. I had no idea what was going on. But I can tell you what happened next is what I consider the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's all these really nice, clean-cut people that I couldn't identify with. They started sharing their stories. They started sharing their experience, their relationship with alcohol and their stories. I mean, they put things into words that I had only felt. I had never in my life related to another human being and identified with somebody else like I did that day with those people. And one alcoholic talking to another, that message from the heart shot straight through my ego and right through my defenses, and it hit home, and I related. And it sparked a little bit of hope, sparked a little bit of, a little interest that maybe if you guys really did know, you really did understand where I come from and what I had been through, and you really weren't drinking, and you were really like nice, clean-cut, showered people, like maybe there was something to this AA thing. Maybe there was something going on here, So I kept coming back. I went to a meeting every single day. I found met people that were more than willing to come pick me up. Only had to ride that bike to a few meetings before I didn't have to ride it anymore. People always picked me up, and I went to meetings pretty much every day for the next year down in Rockingham County and Harrisonburg, and I could tell you that I drank pretty regularly. I drank every couple of weeks. I think the longest I put together was maybe 2 months. And what would happen, is that tension in my chest would just build, and it would just grow, and I would get so uncomfortable. My head would start building up all these reasons and excuses as to why you guys really didn't like me, why I didn't really belong, the uncomfort would become so unbearable of being sober that I would have to do the one thing that I knew that would work, and that would be to take a drink. Because I didn't know anything about the steps. I didn't really know anything about sponsors. I had this guy telling me he was going to be my sponsor, and then he brought me to his house and started reading with all these other guys he sponsored, started reading the Christian Recovery Bible to me, and I was like, that ain't me, buddy. You don't know. I already know about this Bible stuff. That ain't going to happen for me. And so I wasn't going to get a sponsor. That wasn't going to happen, And so, like I said, I knew something was here, though. I just couldn't wrap my head around it, but I wanted what you guys had so badly, so I kept coming back. I kept coming back, and I kept drinking. And then what happened was after about a year, this big, burly mountain man, he'd let me, his name was Biker Bear. Maybe some of you guys know him. I don't know. Pretty popular over on the Luray side, and he had let me detox on the couch a bunch of times. He came up to me, walked up to me, put his big paw on my arm, and I thought he was going to say something like, "Keep coming back, son. Don't leave before the miracle." Something cheesy like everybody always says. But instead, he said, "Son, you're going to die." And I'll tell you, I don't think I could have heard anything else at that moment, but I heard that, and I believed it. I believed that he was right, that if something didn't change, I probably was going to die of alcoholism. I was only 20 years old, well, about 21 at the time. So I asked him, "What do you do? What do I do?" And that's probably the most willing thing I said that whole year coming along. It was probably the first time that I actually meant it. What do you do? I didn't have any other options. I had reached that point in my sobriety or in my coming to Alcoholics Anonymous that I didn't have any other options. I'd run out of ideas. I'd run out of excuses. And I asked willingly, what do you do? And he gave me an option. He told me he would move me out to Ocean City into an Oxford house, or he'd move me up to Vienna, Virginia. He said, Ocean City's kind of seasonal, but there's great AA. He said, Vienna, Virginia's got great young people. He goes, you choose. And actually what he said was, in Vienna, Virginia, there were 2 girls to every 1 man. I ain't stupid. I'm good at math, right? So I like that. So I picked Vienna, Virginia. In the Oxford house up there, you had to be 14 days sober to move in. And so I did it. I didn't drink for 14 days. I went to meetings. I hung out on Barry's couch while all the bikers would sit there and play poker, and I stayed sober, and I didn't leave his side. And then by the time when I got 14 days, he packed all my stuff up, which was a box of books that are all half read, because I had this huge thing about reading psychological books, like I was going to figure out what was wrong with me, and I get about halfway through and realized I had no idea what it was talking about, so I was like, great, I'm on to the next one, right? So I had this big box of books. I had 2 trash bags of clothing, most of it was hand-me-down stuff that were given to me by people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had a bicycle. Because at this time, I had a friend that had taught me about mountain biking. And so I, saved up some money and I bought myself a real nice bike. And still to this day, I love mountain biking, but that was like the first thing that I really got into in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I love that bike. We piled all this stuff into his van, and he moved me up and dropped me off in Vienna, Virginia, where I knew nobody. I had never been to a meeting there. I didn't know what was going on. He just said, "Stay sober." That's all I said. And I remember I went to meetings there for about a month, just riding my bike around, and I met the home group that I have to this day. If you don't know what a home group is, it's a community and Alcoholics Anonymous people and members of Alcoholics Anonymous that are living and breathing these principles in every aspect of their life. It's not about the 1 hour that they're at the meeting, it's about the other 23 that they're living, and they were practicing these principles. And when I walked in, I knew there was something different about this meeting, because they just surrounded me afterwards. They made me feel so popular, so cool. Everybody wanted my number. I was like, yeah, hell no, they get it, And then I did, and they offered to pick me up and give me plans, And this guy, he picked me up every day for a month, and I asked him to sponsor me, and he started working me through the steps, because that's what everybody else was doing. They were talking about steps, they were talking about sponsorship, they were talking about, cleaning up after yourself and getting invited over for dinner. They were talking about showing up to the meeting early and setting up chairs and staying late and going out for coffee. And they would just, they treated each other so much differently than anything I'd ever seen. I mean, they were like nice to each other, and it was so wild. And they let me hang out with them. They let me be with them, and I was belligerent. I was mean. And they didn't care. They put up with it. I remember where I come from. If you want to have a little respect, you got to walk up to the biggest dude in the room, and you got to punch him. You just have to hit him. And if he gets your butt whipped, all right, that's okay. You're probably going to have a little respect, right? So I walked up to the biggest dude there, this guy, Pretty Boy Mike. He had his hat on backwards, he had his clean-cut goatee, and he looked like everybody liked him. And I walked right up to him, and I asked him if he'd step outside with me because we had a problem. And he goes, "No, man, we don't live like that anymore. Just sit down and have some coffee." I was like, what? And I sat down, and it felt awkward. Like, I didn't know what to do. All right. But, they put up with it. They showed me through their actions how to do something different, how to live differently, that first sponsor that I had asked to sponsor me, I was not very easily sponsored. I would yell at him pretty regularly. I would curse at him, tell him I'm not going to do anything, and eventually fired me. And for good right. I mean, I was not easy to get along with. And what I did was I got a sponsor that everybody really looked up to, and somebody that had been sober for about 26 years, and he was a real good, member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I asked him to sponsor, thinking this would be the guy that's going to show everybody how awesome I am. And instead, this guy showed me how awful I was. I mean, he had a way of talking to me that just penetrated, again, right through my ego, and it just showed me the truth about me that I was incapable of seeing. I was so delusional when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought, again, I'm, a couple months sober, I've worked at Starbucks, but I'm the man, I don't know how to have friends or get a girl, but guys, look at me, and he told me what a loser I was. Like, regularly, I would call him, and he would scream things at me and tell me to write it down and carry it around in my pocket. And I didn't know what he had said because he screamed so loud. So I asked him, "How do you spell that?" And he said, "Look it up. Failure. You're a failure." I was like, "Oh, failure. Got it." I write it down. I put it in my pocket. And I'd call him up and I'd say things like, "I don't think people like me." He goes, "They don't have to like you. You're an asshole." Click. And he would hang up on me. I was like, dude, where's the love? And I'll tell you what, though, that man saved my life. Because he showed me how my actions really affected the outside world around me. Because I had no idea. I didn't know how I was really, viewed, or how the selfishness and that I walked around with really affected my relationships with other people. But that man showed me, and that man taught me how to be a friend. How to be a son. And I went through a 4-step with him, and I went through the 8th step, and we got to the 9th step, and the first thing, that I had to go through was, first thing I had to deal with was the resentment that I had with my mother. She was the top of my list, and like I said, that woman beat me till I was 15 years old, and when I was disfellowshipped for drinking and drugging out of the church, she'd turn her back on me, and same with my brother and my sister, and they she won't have anything to do with me actually to this day. I'm going to tell you. At this time, I've been probably estranged from them for about 6 or 7 years at this point, and I hated that woman. I hated her with every fiber of my being. And he told me that we were going to write her a letter. And I said I did not want to do it, but my sponsor hadn't put me in the wrong direction yet, so I wrote a letter, and I remember, I borrowed a friend's computer, and they had Word, and I typed up this real, nice, like, I forgive you for all the wrongs that you have done to me, and, I'm ready to have a clean slate and move on and have a relationship with, you can have a relationship with your son again, and, and I was so proud of this letter, like, I'm letting go, I'm forgiven. And he laughed, he crumbled it up, and he bounced it off my forehead. That wasn't going to work, He told me that I was going to handwrite it. And I had to be honest with him, I didn't really know how to write, I hadn't really done any schooling in a long time, and when I started writing something down, I looked like a 4-year-old, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So what he did was he printed out a list of all the letters, the whole alphabet, in cursive, and he handed it to me, and he said, you're going to learn how to write by taking your inventory every night, and when you're ready, you're going to write a handwritten letter. And so for the next 6 months, every night, I took my inventory, and I hand wrote it, and I still have this book, but if you look at it, it looks like a freaking 4-year-old is trying to look at himself, and as you go through the whole thing, at 6 months, it actually looks like an adult is writing down, and reflecting on his actions, and it's an amazing thing. And like I said, after about 6 months, I was ready, and I sat down. And during the 6 months, obviously, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've got service positions at meetings. I have relationships with people, with my pigeon brothers, the people that I'm going to meetings with, and I'm very active. And parts of me are I'm starting to change. I'm no longer stealing. I'm no longer getting in fights. I am, sort of resembling a functioning member of society, and it's a pretty cool thing. And I sat down and I wrote this woman a letter, and it was nothing more than just, this is where I'm at in life, this is what I'm doing, I'm sober now, this is the job that I have, hope you're doing well. That's it, real simple. And I sent that off and didn't really think much of it. And what happened was about probably a month later, at first, I got a letter from my baby sister. Somebody, again, I hadn't talked to in about 7 or 8 years. And then I opened it up, and the first thing I pulled out was a picture of her as a grown woman, and something inside of me just broke, and I started crying. And I cried for the first time probably since I was a child, because when I was a child, when my mom would hit me, I stopped crying because I wasn't going to give her that gratification. And I haven't cried since. And like I said, something inside of me had broke, and I just started crying. And what had happened is, I was on the phone with this guy that my sponsor also sponsors, a close friend of mine, and he told me that, maybe that guy that could burn holes through his arm will finally start to feel something, and he was right. A little piece of that wall that I had built, a little piece of that defense that kept me and blocked me from everybody else started to break down. A little piece of it got knocked off, and then a couple of weeks later, I got a letter from my mother. Letter just basically stated where she was at. It was actually a 4-page essay on how if I don't come back to the truth, I'm going to die in Armageddon and blah blah blah, all this other great stuff, and watch out for Satan, all that stuff. But that's what my mom's into. So all right, and it was okay, And then I wrote her another letter, and then she wrote me back. And then I wrote her another letter, and then she wrote me back, and I remember about 2 years, I was sober about 2 years, and I got a letter from her, I got a phone call actually, because I'd always put my phone number in there, and I got a phone call from her. It was the first time in, almost 10 years that I was actually talking to my mom, and we had a good conversation. It was nothing special, just talking about where we were at, and she started telling me, a little bit about, she started having little strokes, right? And I asked what that was like, and she was, oh, you know, sometimes I walk into a room and I forget why I'm there, and I was like, oh, that happens to me all the time, and she laughed, you know, and when she laughed, something else broke. More of that wall broke down, you know, and I felt something that I'd never felt before, but it was like this glow and this compassion, and then I knew it was love from my mom, you know, and it felt real good, you know, and then I asked her, I said, this was nice, can we do it again? And she said, no, I can't. And I said, okay. And I hung up with her, and it was okay. You know, I'd made peace with that relationship. And whatever she believes in, that's her belief. And I have to be okay with that. And I might not have the relationship that I want with her, but it's something. I know she's all right. You know, I got to talk to her. And again, by healing that relationship, I was then able to go out and to start becoming a real friend to the people that I was in the room with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember, you know, probably about the same time, you know, my brother and sister were coming up from Florida, and they were going to be in the D.C. area, and so was my dad, and he invited us all out to this big dinner, and it was going to be the first time in over a decade that he was going to have all of his kids at the same table, and he was real excited, and I'm walking up to my Friday night meeting, and I'm pretty looking forward to this, and he called me, and he was very sorry. He was like, I'm real sorry, but you know, your brother and sister basically said that if you show up, they won't. So I have to disinvite you. You know, and I'm like, okay, I understand. You know, you got to do what you got to do. You know, and then I hung up the phone and I just started crying. And I broke down right in front of the meeting. And a big buddy of mine, JD, walked up, asked what was going on, and I told him. And he picked me up and he gave me a big bear hug and he said, it's okay, we're your family now. And he wasn't kidding. You know, for the last over 10 years, I've always had a home to go to on the holidays. I've always, you know, had some place to be, and I have built relationships with the people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that far surpass any blood relationship. And the family that I've been blessed with here has absolutely filled my spirit. Has absolutely filled me as a person. And because of their examples, you know, over the last, you know, 10 years, I've become a pretty wholesome individual, and I've learned how to work, you know, at work. And then again, I still to this day don't have any education beyond the 8th grade. And, you know, I do IT. I'm actually, you know, I work for some pretty big wigs up in the Baltimore area, and I built their networks. I, you know, routed their firewall, I installed their firewalls, I managed their servers, I managed their domains and their environments, and I tell you, they think I'm some IT guru, and I'll tell you, I'm just good at Googling, you know. But because of my attitude when I showed up to work, you know, because of me getting this job, and you know, I started off as a customer service rep in the copier division, you know, but because of the principles that were taught to me in Alcoholics Anonymous, I just show up and you treat your job like a service position, you know, and you see where you can be helpful and where you can be useful, and you respect your bosses. That was a tough thing for me. But, you know, you do what you're told, and by just doing those simple things, you know, I got promoted, and opportunities opened up, and doorways opened up, and they just kept asking me, will you do this, will you do this, will you do this, and then, you know, today I sit here in front of you living a life that is far beyond my natural capacity. I'm going to tell you that right now. I am not qualified for half the things that I do in my day-to-day routine, but I do it because I show up and I just practice the principles that we're taught here. You know, I do the next right action, and it's awesome. You know, it's a great life, and I'd say, you know, the physical stuff is awesome. Like, you know, I've been blessed. You know, I have a good life, but you know, I'd say the real gifts are the fact that I can sit here in a room full of complete strangers and feel 100% comfortable with doing what I am today. You know, and the person that I am, and feel comfortable in my own skin. You know, I don't regret anything that I've done in the last 48 hours, and that's a big deal. You know, I would share openly and honestly anything going on in my life, you know, and you know, the peace that I feel when I go to sleep at night, and the peace that I feel when I wake up in the morning, you know, those are the gifts that I genuinely cherish. Because I know jobs come and go, you know, girlfriends come and go, you know, relationships that, you know, sometimes they have their downsides and their upsides, but the real, you know, meat and potatoes of Alcoholics Anonymous, the showing up and being able to touch favorably on somebody else's life, whether they want you to or not. being able to actively participate in the 12 steps. The 12 steps has absolutely changed my life. For a while, I was taking a meeting to a homeless shelter in St. Elizabeth in Southeast DC, and these guys are the absolute bottom of the band. This is Skid Row. They have nowhere else to go. They leave there and they either get sober or they die. And I've gotten to I've gotten to take the scissors out of my tool pouch and then give it to a guy that had experience cutting hair so that he could get a job and make a little bit of money, and then I've gotten to get coloring, pads and pens to guys that just like to draw, and I get to drive out there and take them to my home group where they're welcome, and I've watched them, right now there's currently 3 of them in my home group that are sober for over a year, and it's just like, if you don't know what it's like to feel genuine happiness for somebody else's development or somebody else's growth, you're missing the boat, because that is the true nature of Alcoholics Anonymous, is being able to see, to give freely what I've been given, and then to experience the peace that comes with that is just absolutely awesome, and I couldn't ask for anything else. If I lost my job, if I got kicked out of my house, as long as I still had that, I know I'd be all right. I know I'd be happy. I know I'd be comfortable, and everything else would kind of work itself out. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I am the man that stands before you today because of it. And the only reason, is because of the examples and the people in the room that have, taught me how to live this life. And I love you all very much, and it's been an honor to be here. And I guess I'm pretty much out. I'm not out of time, but I'm done with my story.